Hey everyone, Chad Henry here, slingshotfutures.com, and welcome to the Daily Market Outlook for Futures. This is where we take a look at our big six markets on the Bund, gold, bonds, crude oil, Nasdaq, and the S&P, and we formulate an attack method for tomorrow's trading. Now, when we're looking at today's movement overall, pretty slow in the grand scheme of things. We did have some nice movement in the afternoon, which definitely made up for it. But I know the morning session was pretty brutal unless you came in for the European trading hours. Now, before we jump into all the charts and everything, make sure to swing on over to slingshotfutures.com, scroll down, and click on the Join the Daily Outlook newsletter so you will be added to our mailing list, and that way you'll know every single time we post anything new, and this will be sent directly to your inbox. Along with that, we talk about different stocks and different stats and different things to keep an eye on going into the next day as well. At the bottom of the page, we also have our blogs, and this blog will cover the psychology video that we do every day, along with the morning prep levels, which we post every single morning for the Big Six as well. And that will outline all of the major levels of support and resistance that we're looking for that day. Now, jumping on into the charts here, we're looking for a movement into tomorrow's price action. That's going to be for 3-7 of 17. Starting off on the Bund, we have a relatively range-bound day and an open weekend gap. Now, for the Bund, this one's a little bit different because a weekend gap is really nothing more than a gap, right? It's only open from X to X, and when it's outside of that, it doesn't move anymore, right? So because of that, a weekend gap is nothing more than a gap. It just so happened to be from Friday to Monday. Now, the momentum that we're getting here on the Bund is fairly range-bound, and we're cycling off of the lows. The caveat to that is this drive lower was very aggressive. There was a lot of bearish pressure in that move down. And when they finally found a bottom at the channel lows, and that channel low was derived off of the high to the high, copy it to the bottom, to the tick, bounce off of that area. Pretty interesting to see something like that happen that aggressively and that precisely. But obviously, a lot of profit taking place down there. That tells us one big thing. Sellers are no longer interested in selling down here. They're looking to get better prices. For better prices, that's going to require a correction, which we're in right now. We're in a corrective phase, nice little bull wedge going higher. What I would like to see here for continuation of the downside is a fake out to the highs, and then a breakout back in the opposite direction. Getting us around that same area, you could look at the double bottom that we put in here, or even a little bit higher all through there, but they lead to the same place. 25 to 30, right? That area is a big area of interest for sellers to try to come in and drive the market back down. We have a major downside objective for that weekend gap fill, or in this case, just a standard gap fill at 163.99, but they're going to have to work through the bottom edge of that channel. Now, the longer this takes, the less you're going to have to worry about the bottom of the channel because it's going to take some time to get down there, and by the time it does, the channel may be down here somewhere. So what we're looking for is a fake break of the highs for the buyers to get suckered in, and then stop them all out on the move down and try to finish that drive down back to that 164 even area. On gold, a little bit better. It's still fairly range-bound, lots of back and forth, but at least this one had some decent movement in terms of, kind of getting out of that range funk that we saw on the Bund. Nice bearish tone overall, working its way lower. It does appear as though the buyers were trying to get a range bias. We had a new high and then a double bottom into a new low, and the buyers tried picking it up, but they just kept failing into a new low, tried again, and they failed again. So obviously the buyers just don't have what it takes to get much more than a short-term correction before the sellers drive it back down. Now, the sell move that we've been having to the downside found a nice little channel that's holding the bottom edge very nicely right there and there, but what haven't we had happen yet? Very frequently when you have a channel that's working like this, you'll have a breakdown, right? That is a low probability event, so you assume that there's going to be another leg to it, but usually that secondary leg comes on a retest of the channel again, right? They want to come back and prove it. Hey, you broke out of this channel. What do you think about it now? Do you think it's resistance? Do you think it's support? Etc. And we haven't had that cycle towards the bottom of the channel yet. Now, at this point, we might just be too aggressive where it doesn't happen, right? But all things considered, what I would really like to see is for the market to either just drop down into a new low and finish the job, or get a correction up in the overnight session to breach that 28.1, retest the bottom edge of the channel, and then look for the cycle down, which would definitely be an optimal area, much more so than just selling now for a new low. Now, we are so close to the low that it might not end up doing what we're looking for here at 28.1, but that would be the optimal place that I would like to see. So looking for a move up, a head fake above resistance 28.1, and a retest of the wedge, or channel bottom rather, and then a cycle back down to a new low. Over on the bonds actually had, if you watched the psychology video today, actually moved pretty darn well. The bonds had more movement than the euro for the most of the morning session, which is kind of crazy to say, but pretty nice movement overall. Now, the drive that we had started off with a nice leg to the upside, and it looked like we were going to have a good bullish day. But then they made that lower high and absolutely tanked all the way back down. So with that big drive lower, you have a new channel off of the highs, transpose it to the lows. Beautiful hold all through there for a good hour or two. Actually, more than that. This is 10:30 all the way until around 1, going on 2 o'clock. So very long period of time they kind of got stuck there. And they missed the major objective at 25 by 1 tick. Right? So because they missed that area, well, they tested it to the tick, but they never went through it. And a lot of times when something like that happens, the market hasn't filled everybody that's waiting there. And that could lead to some traders being a little bitter, right? Hey, I didn't get filled there. What the heck, market, right? So what we may end up looking for here is a deeper correction. Sellers obviously no longer want to sell down here. So we're looking for a correction up. Let this bull phase kind of get out of its system. Pull into the area of resistance between 09 all the way up to around 10 or so, and then look maybe even a head fake above for a drive back down to the lows to finish that job off and poke through that area to fill everybody. Now, that may not happen until the afternoon session later tonight. It may not happen until tomorrow. The bonds tend to go pretty quiet after things open up, but that's what we're looking for. Correction back up into the area of resistance between 09 up to 10 or 11 or so, maybe even above that, and then looking to drive it back down to the lows once again. On crude oil was pretty relentless today. It's just lots and lots of back and forth, lots of range, especially if you only look from 9 o'clock at the open, or the old open of crude oil. 9 o'clock was right there, and you can see, man, this thing was just nasty looking. There's huge amounts of wick on all sides, and just it couldn't get out of its own way. Lots of range-bound trading after the open. But all things considered, if we look at the bigger picture, we did have a fairly decent bear trend working that did reverse all the way back up to a high. So we're running into a situation now where we have a new high, into a new low, into a new high, and now where are we probably going to go? Down to a new low. So we're looking for short-term buying pressure until this area between 53.09 and 02 breaks. Once we can break through that area to show that the buyers are no longer interested, even on a pullback, then we can look to use it as resistance and finish the job off to the downside. Now, in the short term, you can look for possible scalps around this area for buyers to come in and try to hold that level more and more and more. We've already seen several attempts, so it wouldn't necessarily be bad to find some support off that level, some short-term scalps. But really, I think the big money is going to be lying in wait for the breakdown, retest, and then finish the job off to cycle the range back to a new low. So several options here on crude, but I think the big one is going to be waiting for that short. Over on the Nasdaq, we're testing that buy area right now, but very range bound. We started off the weekend with a gap down. They did fill the weekend gap on the very first candle and continued lower. We found a new low that held in for quite a while before they retested it, and after they tested it, it immediately rejected back up to a new high, found a little bit of a wedge top. That broke down, back down to a new low again. And now we're starting to grind back up again. Now, we haven't broken the highs of that open. We have broken the intraday starting from Monday morning at midnight, right? If you discount all that happened on Sunday, we have had a very back and forth range bound type, and we're at the highs. If you include Sunday, though, we haven't broken above that high, and because of that, we still may have a decent amount of upside potential here. A lot of these moves that we've been seeing so far have a very strong move and then lackluster follow through and a break back down. In this case, we have a big move up and pretty good continuation of the upside. If they hold this area between 59.5 down to 58.75, then we're looking for continuation to finish that job off. Potentially just retest that 53.69 even, but the main objective that a lot of buyers are going to be looking for is that overall high at 53.74 half. So we're cycling off of that buy area right now. This is where buyers are going to want to come in for the overnight session and then look to drive that up to hit the first objective and then the secondary objective up here to kind of knock that out of the park. If this fails, right? If this fails to hold this major area of support, just like we saw before, if this fails to hold that major area of support, you're looking for them to come back and act as resistance for a potential large failure back down to a new low, and that would follow the cycle of what's been happening so far. So in the short term, you have a buy opportunity, but if they can't hold it, then you're looking to switch gears over to the sell side. And then in the S&P, very similar situation with that weekend gap, but the weekend gap on this was filled, and we also had a big wick back early on the, well, I guess late in the Sunday session at night and all. Big move down, go into a big range, another breakdown, and then very reminiscent of the Nasdaq. Now, in terms of the S&P, we're kind of looking for the same thing here. We haven't broken above that major high that was put in. If you're looking at only from today, from midnight on, we have broken above those highs quite a few times, but using the weekend inclusive, we haven't seen that. We're bouncing off of that major support area just like on the Nasdaq, and the same game plan comes true. If we're looking to hold this area, we're looking for buying pressure on up to hit the medium objective and then the full objective above the highs. If this ends up failing, however, then you're looking to switch gears to sell mode and using it as resistance for a new leg lower. So pretty much copy paste in terms of approach on the Nasdaq and the S&P. A lot of times they're fairly similar, but enough to kind of have you going both ways. In this case, it's pretty much identical. So we'll have to see what the overnight session brings us. But looking at tomorrow in terms of news, just like today, there isn't any. Tomorrow we have some news out of the Canadian, out of Canada, and later in the afternoon out of Japan. But that's it. We don't have any U.S. news for tomorrow, which can definitely cause a little bit of the same what we've seen today. Kind of a slow start, not really anything happening. Nobody really interested in terms of the overall movement. So another day tomorrow where we're going to have to play it a little bit careful. If you do trade anything related to the Canadian dollar or the Japanese yen, you may have some fun. But outside of that, that's about all we're going to have to work with. Now, in the newsletter, the email portion, you will find a few stocks that we're talking about as well for tomorrow. Very hot stocks today in terms of the social media mention is just ridiculous on these. So definitely keep an eye out on those and do some research on those and see if they fit your trading plan. Outside of that, though, like we always say, make a plan, trade the plan, follow those rules, and you will be A-okay. Until tomorrow, have a good one.